Welcome to the Make Meaning podcast. I'm Lynne, a writer, entrepreneur, and changemaker, and I've dedicated my life to sharing stories of how people make meaning in their work and find purpose in their lives. This podcast highlights some of the great ideas and activities people do every day to make the world a better place. So much of the meaning we find comes from interacting with great people, developing relationships that are mutually beneficial, and doing work that inspires. I hope you'll be inspired by the people you meet on this podcast. We all need to find a way to make meaning in the mundane. So the Make Meaning podcast focuses on how people make meaning in their work and find purpose in their lives. And we appreciate being here at Le Petit Déjeuner and the Detroit Podcast Festival today to share two of our early guests, David Dwaihy, who's one of the co-founders of Detroit City Football Club, our semi-professional soccer team in Detroit, which we love, and Amy Haimerl, who has many, many credentials to her name, including being an award-winning journalist, an author, and the founder of the Shady Ladies Literary Society. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how both of you make meaning and how your organizations also lift people up and give people a forum for building community. So welcome to the Make Meaning podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's begin by hearing briefly from each of you about passion. So you both believe in the power of community organizations and grassroots movements to make something happen. So David, talk a little bit about how that plays out with DCFC.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think what's so unique and special about Detroit City FC is just the idea that it was started by 5 friends who met each other in a co-ed recreational soccer league at Belle Isle, looked around and saw the potential for something a little bigger, and basically established a team that was immediately latched onto by the local community and the suburbs around it. What it's grown into exceeded all of our wildest expectations, but I think just the idea that it's a community-run organization and that it's grown to the extent that it has because of the community that supports it makes it all the more exciting to be a part of it, but also all the more unique because in a time where soccer has become, in this country anyway, kind of a sport funded by billionaires, the fact that this group of 5, humble Detroit residents has turned it into something bigger through the help of those around them kind of makes it extra cool.
I love that. I think that's, to me, and I'm a native Detroiter, I feel like the term Detroit scrappy is a thing that I want to start using because I think we are. We make things happen. We bring people together. I think it's in the DNA of Detroit. And that's what I love so much about DCFC is that it just feels very Detroit to me, and I don't want to lose that. It feels like no other city is going to have that kind of passion and style and, everybody come together and just sign on to it.
For sure.
Yeah. So Amy, talk a little bit about how this sense of passion and grassroots community organizing drives Shady Ladies as well.
Well, I would say we started with passion, and I had a passion for supporting women authors. I'm an author myself and found out how difficult it was for writers to connect with readers.
Yes.
Publishing and publishers very rarely send writers out on book tour, so my initial idea was just like, look, if we could bring emerging women authors to Detroit and pair them with local women chefs and create these great experiences, we could, make Detroit a hub for literary conversations and put us in front of the publishers.
Yeah.
But in doing that, I discovered women came for the food, or they came for the book, or they came for whatever wacky location I found, from a cemetery to a field house, but they come back for the community.
Or the cocktails.
Or the cocktails. Cocktails are key, as always, cocktails.
Yeah.
But really what they came back for, I found out, was community, and the idea that women, especially at a certain point, start losing opportunities to meet new people and engage in conversations.
Yes.
And I was providing that and providing a place where they could come without a friend and leave with 20.
Yes.
And so that community, and now really my passion about building not just Shady Ladies from an experience perspective, but what is the Shady Ladies community across our country that believes in the power of women's voices and women's stories.
Yeah. And I think that both of your organizations really lift up, sort of underdogs, or, it's very diverse, it's welcoming, everybody's welcome, and like you said, you can arrive by yourself and leave with a friend. And I've noticed it at both, both DCFC games, you can go over to the supporter side and you don't know anybody and you're just swept up in the enthusiasm and the passion and you dance along, you know? I mean, and at Shady Ladies, I've gone to several now and I see familiar faces, people whose names I don't remember, but I remember them, and so we just strike up a conversation right away. And I think that's very unique. I mean, I think it's needed in this day and age when people feel more distant than ever. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how you cultivate that. You know, I don't know if it's purposeful or if it just sort of happened, but maybe there's a culture that you built that made it conducive for people to feel comfortable and welcome. And so therefore friendships are blooming from that. I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, I can speak to that a bit. I think the ownership group always kind of had the motto, like, we want to be the host of the party, not the life of the party. And I think the supporters that have latched onto the club over the years have very much made it their own thing. And they've kind of forged the identity of the club. And we've been fortunate in that core of people were a lot of really open-minded, socially progressive, welcoming men and women. And so I think as a result, kind of the feel of the club has followed suit. So I guess what worked for us was just the idea that, I think we tried to create a platform, not be too imposing on anything and kind of let it grow organically, and you just hope that good people are going to be involved and take the reins and that the rest will follow. But I think whether it's a literary club or a soccer club, there was a famous soccer player who once said his childhood club meant so much to him because it was just a place where he felt like he belonged, where he kind of found himself.
Yeah.
And I think whether it's soccer or through literature, just the idea that you can kind of identify with these people that are otherwise strangers, like you said, you leave with friends. There's some common ground there, but ultimately it's just this shared experience that kind of fosters those friendships and that feeling of comfort and belonging, so that you come back, and the next time you come back, you bring a friend because you want them to have that same experience.
Absolutely, 100%. What are your thoughts about that, Amy?
So, I would say that absolutely being the host of the party, not the life of the party, absolutely kind of overlaps with what I do. I think that, growing up and in many situations, spending time feeling like you're on the outside of a conversation, you're at a party and an event, and there's people talking and you can't sort of break in and just feel like you're an outsider. And I didn't want to create something where everybody felt like outsiders, but wanted to create something where everybody felt like they were an insider and everybody was an us and nobody was a them. And so I think the phrase that I've used since the beginning that's been really important has been grace and graciousness. So when you arrive at a Shady Ladies event, I want you to feel warm and welcomed and like everything has been thought through, and that I as a host am going to make sure if you're standing by yourself that I'm doing an introduction or getting you into a conversation with somebody else, and that everybody who comes knows that this is a space where we're going to talk about ideas, and we may have, we've had Palestinian authors and Jewish authors and African American authors and immigration authors, and that this is a place for us to be able to say all of us are us, and we're going to learn from the stories and see humanity in them. And so that grace and humanity, I think Shady Ladies just latch on to that feeling and then keep perpetuating it themselves.
You bring up a really good point that is a great segue to my next question, which is about how you guys are creating common ground for people from very diverse backgrounds and origins to come together with a shared interest and find connection. And I feel, it's so important in our polarized world today. We really have huge gulfs between people across the country, around the world. And you're both doing this really well. Soccer, I feel, is sort of that universal language that anybody can play. It doesn't matter if you have money or none, what race you are, what religion, where you live. There are children without shoes in communities far from here who make a ball and they're kicking it around and they become superstars, and then there are kids with very high priced soccer balls from the local store and, their parents are giving them every tool that they need. But it's a universal language where we come together, and when we're kicking that ball around and we're watching and we're cheering on the people who are, we're just united in that. And it's the same thing with the stories that people share. All of the books that you featured are stories of overcoming challenge, of facing odds and figuring out how to surmount them and finding comfort in community and support. So maybe talk a little bit about, maybe you didn't intend this or maybe you did, but how what you provide is giving a safe, common ground for all kinds of people to come together and really connect over a shared interest or shared passion?
I would say, so that was a mission of mine from the get-go, was this idea that we were going to bring emerging women authors and we were going to pair them with emerging women chefs, and that we were going to focus on diversity first and foremost, and making sure that this was a place for different people and different conversations to be happening. Because in these polarized times, I fundamentally believe that stories and good food can bring us together and create that space for us to get to know each other so that everybody becomes an us around the table instead of a them.
Yes.
Doing it, I think, is always a little more difficult than the idea of it, but it's come along, and I think it's about intentionality and saying, I am intentional about the stories I choose to feature, whether that is the scientist from our chemistry club talking about concussions, or being actively saying, what's my mix of authors? Do I have a good range of backgrounds and experiences? And are these stories really reflecting this idea of coming together? Because there's lots of great books, but I don't need another beach read that's just like fun to go through. But like,
Right.
What are those stories helping us explore and putting us in worlds we wouldn't normally see? So I think intentionality is the key for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, as you mentioned, soccer is globally such an accessible sport. You know, it's probably the most commonly played sport among youth. It's growing exponentially in this country for boys and girls alike. And so we had a great choice of sport to use.
Yeah.
But I think if you've ever been to a game or if you've heard about the experience at a game, I think the atmosphere and the event itself kind of transcends the sport. So many people come because they look around, they see people enjoying themselves, they see people passionate about something. The spectacle of the game is certainly worthwhile on its own, but I think just the idea that you're kind of coming to this space in the city and you're around like-minded people that are kind of pulling together for a common cause, it's a natural bond. And as a club, what we've been fortunate to be able to do is every year we have a charity game, and we've been able to find causes that, as you said, kind of try to bridge some of those gulfs that are currently existent, in this country in particular, but worldwide. And so, for example, a few years ago, we were able to generate some revenues to support Freedom House during a time when, that was a really hot topic, still is, obviously.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
to be able to make a statement like that as a club that, hey, look, this is what we support, and if you want to be a part of it, we welcome you to do so. Not to go negative in any way, just to embrace the idea of supporting a cause that means something to you. Really, I think it has a special power to it.
Yeah, and you're doing a Pride Raiser, and today's the last day for that. So
Yeah.
I know this is streaming live.
Mm-hmm.
So even though we will re-air this on our channels, I'd love for you to tell a little bit about how people can get in on the action today. Still?
Yeah, perfect segue. Thank
Yeah,
you. So,
sure.
so Pride Raiser is a nationwide coalition of supporters of soccer teams that are raising money to support local LGBTQ industries, initiatives, organizations. And so our local support is being given to the Ruth Ellis Center.
Okay.
Our primary supporters group, the Northern Guard supporters, have a page on this Pride Raiser platform.
Okay.
The website, if anyone is interested, is prideraiser.org. And then you
Okay.
can scroll through. It's really cool. There's tens of hundreds of teams around the country where the supporters groups have organized this fundraiser. And the format is you make a pledge per goal. Goals scored in the month of June then get multiplied by that pledge, and that's how people are supporting their local causes.
Awesome.
And so we're up at like $875 per goal right now as a club. And then there's a secondary supporters group that's also raising funds. And so
Nice.
we have our final game in the month of June today at 5.
Today, yep.
Hopefully we'll tack a few more goals onto that multiplier.
Awesome.
But if anyone's interested, prideraiser.org is the way to support.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, Robin from Motor City Woman is going to be giving out tickets to today's game that you generously
Awesome.
donated. Yeah, so I want to close with one last question. It's kind of a big question, but in Detroit, we're sort of riding this wave of entrepreneurship. And you both have taken an idea and given it life. And really, it's grown beyond your expectations, and then it gets bigger in your vision. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that process of, you sort of come up with this idea, and then how do you make that a reality? What goes into it? What has gone into building both of your organizations? And then what are you looking for in the future?
So I actually teach creativity and entrepreneurship at Michigan State.
Perfect.
So I'm stronger on the creativity than maybe the entrepreneurship. The business side is something I'm still learning, but the way we started was just with an idea. I had this idea that if we could change up the book reading and do it something as an experience that had more pieces to it that could get people excited, we could do something different here in Detroit. And then as I teach my students, you just have to take action. You start with something. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to, as we say in the entrepreneurial world, don't try to boil the ocean, right? Like try to take one piece, build that, and then step by step go. And I think that we did that, and now I'm trying to figure out how to scale and how to become something bigger. What does that mean? What does that look like without ever losing the authenticity and the sense of grace and graciousness and inclusiveness that has always sort of been a hallmark of Shady Ladies. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to in the future, is figuring out that next challenge.
So I can just see it now, the Shady Ladies Literary Society book tour. So authors now are going to want to go on your tour of all the American cities where there are Shady Ladies events, right? And you're going to sign them. It's going to be like a really big deal.
I would love that, yes.
I'm just working on my next book, and I'll let you know when it's ready.
Excellent.
So, okay, all right, perfect. What about you, David?
Thanks. Yeah, I think in my case, it wasn't my idea. I had a friend from college who kind of had this vision of a community-based grassroots team in the city, and he invited me to be a part of it. And so for me, I think the first step was, as I alluded to earlier, surrounding yourself with good people. Like I had reconnected with this friend from college. He invited me to be a part of it, and I said yes. And I think sometimes just saying yes to something that, even if you're not 100% sure about it, giving it a chance. And it's turned in, I got to know this amazing group of 4 other partners, and then every Saturday night it's grown into this collective of like 6,000 or 7,000 people that I'd all consider like really good people that are buying into this cause. And so taking a chance on something that comes your way, being open-minded, having ideas yourself that you can bring to the table, obviously, and being confident in those ideas, but most importantly, just putting yourself in a position to get the invite in the first place.
So leap and the net will appear, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So as we close the Make Meaning podcast, I'm Lynne Golodner, and we do this every week of the year. We focus on how we make meaning and find purpose, and I wanted to ask both of you to finish with a few thoughts from your own lives. You both do a lot of different things. David, you're a math teacher, you're a dad, you are a partner in a really big, exciting soccer complex now, I would say. Amy, you're a professor, a journalist, author, and leading such a wonderful literary revolution. So maybe leave us with the last few words about your meaning and your purpose and what you're doing every day.
My meaning and my purpose every day, I think, is a question I have to ask myself every day as I'm on this journey, and recognizing that I think that one of the unique skills I have in life is I grew up really poor in rural Colorado. Now I have always lived in urban cities. I seem to be this person who can bridge worlds. So what makes meaning for me is figuring out how to be a bridge and a connector between people, whether that's my students at Michigan State or that Shady Ladies, bringing them together around ideas. That what makes meaning for me is helping people and bringing people together.
I love it. Thank you.
For sure, I'd echo that sentiment 100%. And I think for me, in terms of the search for making meaning lately, it's something that I don't think I'm always doing a great job of, but just being present in whatever. Because as you mentioned, we're busy. We have a lot of things going on, and as a father and a husband in particular, I feel like so often I'm thinking about that next thing while I'm in the midst of something that's right. so important at the time, and it's right. really easy to miss out. And so. Just trying to be mindful and present in whatever you're doing, and taking faith in the fact that things will get done, and you'll be able to commit your energy to that next thing when it's time. It's a skill to develop for sure, and it's a presence of mind to have, but nobody's perfect at it, but I think it's something to strive for sure.
Awesome. So David Dwaihy, Amy Haimerl, thank you so much for being on the Make Meaning podcast at the Detroit Podcast Festival. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks so much for letting us be here.
Thanks for listening to the Make Meaning podcast with Lynne Golodner. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. I'd love it if you would share our great conversations with your people so we can all add meaning wherever we go and whatever we do.